Welcome to another edition of the Routine Jumper Podcast, a podcast where we discuss everything NBA basketball. I'm your host, Jalen Dixon, and today we got a couple of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, trying to become one of the biggest podcasts here on the YouTube platform, covering the NBA, man. So go ahead and hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And today, I'm doing a little bit of a hybrid episode. Look, y'all gotta bear with me. In this first month of working on YouTube, doing this routine jumper stuff, I'm gonna be experimenting with a bunch of different stuff. So today we're going to be doing Rapid Fire Friday. We're gonna do it with 4 topics, and I'm focusing on injuries in the Eastern Conference. Stick with me, follow me. Like I said, as you guys know, if you're not familiar, I'll go ahead and explain the rules to you. Rapid Fire Friday is very simple. Usually it's 5 topics. Today it's going to be 4 topics. 4 topics, 20 minutes. We're going to bang this out and talk about everything going on today in the Eastern Conference. So we're going to start with Orlando Magic superstar Paolo Banchero went down the other night against the New York Knicks with a groin injury. The report is that the MRI came up pretty good. Put him in a position where he's going to get reevaluated daily as opposed to having a timetable that puts him out a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's a little bit more open-ended. That can mean that he could be back as soon as the next game after the Brooklyn Nets, which would actually be on the road at the Houston Rockets. Or it could be a little bit more extensive than that. There's 2 games that I think he could probably target as a real comeback if he doesn't come back in that Houston game. The one that I think would come to mind is next Tuesday against the Golden State Warriors. That's kind of where I'm looking at it. I think the Golden State Warriors game is probably the latest that Paolo Banchero will be coming back to the lineup. But the whole Paolo Banchero injury brought up a little nugget that I kind of want to touch on, which is how the Orlando Magic may or may not be able to operate how the Orlando Magic are going to be able to operate without Paolo Banchero in the lineup. See, one of the biggest things that Jamal Mosley has touched on throughout the offseason and in the early portion of this year is 2 things in particular: maintaining a defensive identity and sharing the basketball. And a lot of Orlando Magic fans will tell you that Paolo Banchero tends to be a bit of a ball stopper. See, his association, his player comp coming into the NBA, a lot of people associated him with someone like Carmelo Anthony, another person who had a little bit of an issue in terms of getting a little too happy with things like getting isolation possessions, stopping the ball in the half court, slowing the offense down, and not really helping with real player movement and ball movement in the half court setting, right? So now you have a situation where, for a minimum 1 game against the Brooklyn Nets, and granted, it's the Brooklyn Nets, so you might not have a really great sample size to work with, not only because it's 1 game, but also because it's the Brooklyn Nets. But you may have 1 game, maybe 2 or 3 of a sample size where you get to learn what this team can do without Paolo Banchero in the lineup and see if there is a little bit more ball movement without him. If there is a little bit more fluidity in terms of creating consistent ball movement, creating consistent actions off of down screens and multiple passes and things of that nature involving Franz Wagner as more of a point forward, because that's kind of what Paolo Banchero has played through these first handful of games. Is he's done a lot of bringing the ball up. He's been a big time facilitator for this team. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's right up there as like one of the leaders for assists for the Orlando Magic right now. He had a couple of games where he's had 7 to 9 assists throughout this season already. So now with Franz Wagner, who's been absolutely balling, and it's been very under the radar because the Orlando Magic up until recently were kind of floating just barely above water. Franz is averaging like 23, 24 points a game, paired with shooting around 37% from beyond the arc on 4 attempts per game. He's been hyper efficient. And now you pair that with the fact that he's going to have more on-ball responsibility. I also think this is a time frame where they're going to really have to maximize Desmond Bane. I came up with this theory, and I think it's played out pretty well so far, that in every single game except for one that Desmond Bane has taken at least 15 shots, he has scored 20 points. And of course, you would say, well, okay, of course, a high volume shooter, the more you throw the ball up, the more likely you are to get towards that high points per game number. Sure, no, I would also I think as much as you could lean into that, the other side of it is I believe that Desmond Bane is what we call a volume shooter, a rhythm shooter. See, some people are considered streaky shooters. These are people that simply on a night to night basis, you never know how dangerous they're going to be as a knockdown shooter. One night they'll go 1 of 6 from beyond the arc, and you don't know what kind of time they're on because they feel like a net negative on the floor the entire time. The other side of it is where they are 7 for 10 from beyond the arc and just had a really hot night and they were able to knock it down and it turned into a career high performance. Desmond Bane isn't one of those players. He's someone that is established now after playing 2 years where he didn't have to really share the ball with John Morant nearly as much because John Morant missed a lot of time. John Morant's missed a ton of time over the last handful of seasons. Desmond Bane has developed more on-ball chops in a way that's forced him to be more demanding as both a ball handler and a self-shot creator. So he's someone that needs real touches, needs consistent touches and consistent opportunities to put the ball in the basket to really find his rhythm within the game. And I think a lot of people would look at Desmond Bane and say, well, he was brought in to be a knockdown 3-point shooter. Why does he need to be so featured in the offense? No, 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 no. He needs to be featured in the offense because of the fact that they brought him in to be more than a 3-point shooter. See, he was brought in to improve their 3-point shooting while adding another perimeter ball handler to give them shot creation outside of Franz on the outside and Paolo Banchero on the inside and in the mid-range area. In order to maximize that, you have to let this guy operate with the ball in his hands more often. And I think that the Magic have been better off in situations where they've allowed Desmond Bane to get more on ball reps. And I think you go back to that game against the Portland Trailblazers 2 games ago, and I genuinely believe that that's going to be an inflection point for this Orlando Magic team. I think two things can be true. I think that this Paolo Banchero situation is going to be good for the Orlando Magic in terms of trying to sit down and really establish what kind of identity they want to lean into. Because I think if the ball movement, pace, and space thing works without Paolo on the floor, I think he's going to have to come back and assimilate to what's working for the team. I think if they struggle to be able to generate real offense and things of that nature, Paolo comes in, he has to put the superhero cape back on and be that guy that helps them kind of get back afloat. So it'll be a really good litmus test for them. But also, I think it'll be a really good chance to kind of force Desmond Bane to be more aggressive, put Desmond Bane in more positions, and also Jamal Mosley force him to trust someone like Desmond Bane more often. Draw up more plays to get Desmond Bane free. Draw up more opportunities for him to be able to get good looks at the basket. So this Paolo Banchero loss, I don't think it's going to be that long of a injury sit down. I think he's going to only miss maximum 3 games with this issue, but I think in those 3 games, the Orlando Magic are going to learn a lot about themselves. Next up, we got the New York Knicks, who lost Jalen Brunson in that same exact game against the Orlando Magic. Knicks lose Jalen Brunson, and they watched him walk out in a walking boot and crutches. And this one was tough because Jalen Brunson, with this injury in particular, this is the same ankle that he sprained last season that forced him to sit out 15 games. Actually, the report from ESPN says it was initially termed as a 2-week injury, but he sat out an additional time period before returning for the playoffs. He seemed to aggravate the ankle injury a couple of times in the first round, but appeared otherwise unbothered by it during New York's run to the Eastern Conference Finals. The loss to the Magic ended the Knicks' 5-game winning streak and was their first defeat at home after starting the season 7-0. And in that game, by the way, the Orlando Magic were absolutely whooping on the Knicks. In the first half, Jalen Brunson scored 16 points in the first half. The rest of the New York Knicks scored 26 in the first half. So 42 points in the first half, and basically about a third of those points came from Jalen Brunson by himself. And for further context, this was a game where the Knicks lost 124 to 107. So without the heroics of Jalen Brunson in the first half to even keep things competitive, this Knicks team could have been beat down even worse at MSG on national television and lose their superstar in the final minutes of the fourth quarter, watching now a situation where, as a team that's been so oriented around giving Jalen Brunson the ball, letting him cook, and having defenders and three-point shooters around him, the issue now is that if he has to miss significant time, the worry becomes who is going to be their real consistent shot generator on a night-to-night basis. Shoot, even on a possession-to-possession basis. Because they haven't really, even with what Mike Brown has instituted coming over from, the Sacramento and the Golden State Warrior background that he has in recent memory, coaching behind those guys. He's implemented a ball moving system that's allowed guys to get more incorporated. Yes, they're one of the top offenses in the league. I believe they're top 8 in scoring right now. But that's with the fact that Jalen Brunson takes so much of the brute offensively as a guy who still commands so much respect. He gets to the free throw line at a high clip. He's somebody that is a danger around the paint, as someone you have to respect as a driver. And so you take all of those elements away, and now you have to ask yourself, who is the next real primary ball handler you can trust to initiate offense on a regular basis? Are you going to start running Mikal Bridges at point forward? Do you give more minutes to someone like Miles McBride? Is this a situation where maybe you have to lean more onto your bench with guys like you acquired Jordan Clarkson and Yabusele, and you have to make up for the lack of offensive production at that one spot by getting more of a burst from your bench, offensive centric guys? Like I said, Clarkson and Yabusele, they tend to be more offensive first guys that can kind of help put points on the board. They've been kind of slow to start this season, but I think there's always an opportunity to kind of maximize this kind of situation for a bench player where they know that they have to step up because they have to, because of the fact that a star player is missing, and it puts more of the onus on them now because it's next man up. The New York Knicks are in a really interesting situation here because, again, if we're going to use the precedent for what this injury was last time, which again, for context, grade 1 right ankle sprain. He's going to miss the game tonight against the Miami Heat as of when this episode is going to be uploaded. And more so, the injury looked bad enough where if he missed 15 games last season, and granted they were taking into consideration also trying to preserve him for the postseason, I would also say with it being so early in the regular season that they may want to actually pace him now the same way they did then. So even though it's not nearly as urgent as back then to kind of preserve him, it might be in their best interest for him even to preserve him, where maybe he sits another 15 games, maybe he sits 15, 20 games. But then you have to ask yourself on top of that, can the New York Knicks afford it? Can the New York Knicks truly afford it? They've had the cushion of being able to be highly effective at home. Again, 7-0 at MSG before that game against the Orlando Magic. But the biggest thing that kind of stands out though is they also had a very home heavy schedule to start the season. Again, 7 home games to kick off the season, and they've played 11 games. Next up on their schedule with Jalen Brunson out, they go to after playing the Miami Heat at home, they go to Miami, to Dallas, to Orlando, to Brooklyn, and to Charlotte. And granted, I know Dallas is in shambles right now. I know that Orlando's trying to find themselves offensively, and of course, we just talked about the fact that Paolo Banchero is out. I don't think that Paolo's gonna miss that game. That's all the way next Saturday. I don't think Paolo's gonna miss that. So that's a big time Eastern Conference matchup on the road. The Brooklyn Nets probably is a gimme game, but the Hornets are not a team to sleep on this year. Those 3 rookies and Sion James, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Colin Knueppel have all been playing really, really good basketball. Shoot, 2 of them are top 5 in the Rookie of the Year ladder right now. So those are 5 games on the road with 3 Eastern Conference teams you genuinely have to put some respect on. Miami, Orlando, and Charlotte, all 3 teams that have been really solid this year, regardless of what their record says, because the production on the floor shows sign of growth. Desmond Bane hit a big time shot against Portland that I think is going to turn their season around, like I mentioned in the last segment. For a team like Miami, they've been the best offense in the NBA with guys like Jaime Jaquez, Simone Fontecchio, Even Andrew Wiggins, some have made the argument that he's having an even better year this season than he had in his All-Star year with Golden State. So that's a team you have to respect. And as I mentioned beforehand, you also have the Hornets. Not to mention, even after that road stint, that 5-game road stint you got the Milwaukee Bucks right after that. Right after that, the Friday after Thanksgiving. I wouldn't be too thankful for that personally. So they're in an interesting stretch here. They built a bit of a cushion for themselves by being so dominant at home, but now that they have this heavy road stretch, if Jalen Brunson is set to miss significant time, especially if it's up to 15 games or more like it was last time that he faced this injury, this puts the New York Knicks in a really tough position because they could mess around and be like a 500 ball club by the end of November. And that's not a great place to be when you're a team that came into the season with such high expectations. Next up, we got to talk about my Bulls, man. We got to talk about my Bulls. I told y'all. I said it right here on the podcast. I said, as much as I love this Chicago Bulls team, I can't allow myself to be picked off by the facade that was that 6-1 start. I knew it. I knew it. They started off 5-1, 6-1, and I started to ask myself, like, bro, is this team truly that good? Are they really that good? Is Josh Giddey just playing absolutely out of his mind right now? And there's two sides of the coin, right? Obviously, the first one is that Josh Giddey was playing genuinely like an MVP before he went down with this ankle sprain that's had him miss the last 2 games. And this 4-game losing streak started before Josh Giddey went out. So this is not entirely just on the back of, oh, Josh Giddey's not playing, so they're not playing at a high enough level. It goes a little bit beyond that. Granted, Josh, he helps dictate their pace so much. He's the leader in terms of helping them facilitate. Him and Nikola Vucevic two-man action is so important because Vucevic struggles to get to the paint in terms of getting real rim rolling touches without having a big time passer like Josh Giddey operating in the pick and roll. I think I saw this crazy stat that like the at the rim percentage for Nikola Vucevic with Josh Giddey on the floor is like 80%, and without him it's like 10% or something crazy like that. Like his ability to get open looks, consistent, efficient looks at the rim in pick and roll opportunities, it's night and day without a passer like Josh Giddey on the floor. And that goes to show you how important he is. If he's set to miss significant time, that could spell real trouble. This team still hasn't had Coby White, who's going to be playing with the Windy City Bulls for a little while. And I really fear that even though their play style is so conducive to putting so much pressure on defenses, I also think it's one of those things where it can get old kind of quickly. I think the difference between teams like this one and teams like the Indiana Pacers of old is that I think that the Indiana Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton have so many other guys that can move the ball to help stir up that transition without it having to pound the rock 94 feet and just try to like initiate offense off of like almost driving from the minute you get the inbound. See, Indiana has this way of bringing the ball up, and you have Nimhart, you have Neesmith, you have Pascal, you have all these guys who are really high IQ passers that know how to move the ball around. So once they cross half court, they're getting into the action early and often just simply by like activating the action as quickly as humanly possible. The Bulls, they genuinely are trying to run and gun. They are the definition of the greatest show on turf on a basketball hardwood in terms of what they're trying to do. And I think that might not be conducive to a long-term success over the course of an 82-game season. I think that puts a lot of strain on guys like Josh Giddey. I think that's going to put a lot of strain on somebody like Coby White when he comes back. And I think that honestly, this Bulls team is only delaying the inevitable. This Chicago Bulls team is going to have to make some really tough decisions this upcoming trade deadline. They have to look at guys like Ayo Dosunmu who has the potential to get an extension. They have to look at guys like Nikola Vucevic, who is going to be an expiring contract this summer. They have to even look at guys like, granted, I don't want to say this, but they have to look at guys like Coby White as well in terms of what they want to do for him or do with him long term. I've already seen some of the nasty stuff on Twitter where people are trying to put Anthony Davis on the Chicago Bulls. If you're going to ask a Chicago Bulls fan, I'm going to tell you straight to your face that I'm not cool with it. The last time we saw a number 3 come to Chicago because he wanted a nostalgic moment, Dwayne Wade played with the Bulls for 1 year, and it was one of the weirdest seasons as a Chicago Bulls fan that I think any of us have ever experienced. So thank you, but no thank you. The Bulls, I think are going to be a middle of the pack team in the Eastern Conference. And that's exactly what they were supposed to be coming into the season. And I think that's exactly where they're going to finish out. Could Josh Giddey coming back healthy really help them? Yes. Do I think Coby White coming back healthy could really help them? Yes. Do I love what Matas Buzelis has been able to do so far this season? Yes. But at the same time, I knew that this team was punching above their weight. I think a lot of people believed the same thing. And even though you could point to certain things like the Josh Giddey injury recently kind of having a contribution to why this free fall is happening so quickly, I would also say it kind of felt like a matter of time because although this team is playing with a different type of energy, I don't know if it's good enough to make them the kind of team that they were to kick off the first 5 to 6 games of the season where they were the number one team in the East, where they were the top defensive rated team in the NBA. I think we all knew that wasn't real. It just sucks that it all kind of came crashing down so soon. And only time will tell if it actually sticks. Maybe it'll turn around again and they'll get right back in the winning column consistently and put together another winning streak and prove me wrong. On the other side of it, I think they got to start looking realistically around the league of what they want to do in terms of making trades and really positioning themselves for this rebuild that they've been doing a terrible job, to say the least, at handling. We're already past the 20 minutes limit. I don't care. We got one more topic left to talk about. And of course, it's apparently the most favorite team on my channel right now, the Detroit Pistons. Detroit basketball. You guys seem to love the Detroit Pistons here on this podcast. And look, I have no beef talking about them, but I will tell you one thing that it's going to be a bit of an issue for them. Isaiah Stewart, ankle injury, listed as questionable against the 76ers. Asur Thompson, ankle injury, set to be out against the Philadelphia 76ers on Friday. Jalen Duren, questionable. Cade Cunningham, day-to-day as well. Tobias Harris is out with an ankle. Marcus Sasser is out with a hip. Jaden Ivey pretty much is in a situation where we're not going to see him for another month due to an arthroscopic procedure done on his right knee. He hasn't if I'm not mistaken, I got to double check this to make sure I'm not tripping. He has not played yet more than one game this season. I just had to double check to make sure I wasn't tripping. Now, granted, did he ball out in the one game against Orlando? Yeah. 22 points. Oh, excuse me. Wait a minute. I'm tripping. That was the last time we saw Jaden Ivey. He has not played a game this season. See, I had a little bit of a casual moment. That's my fault. Had a little bit of a casual moment. See, you can admit it, and you can admit it on camera. Then you can back it up later. See, this is what I'm saying. So, Jaden Ivey hasn't had a single dribble for this team this season. Tobias out, Marcus Sasser out, Cade Cunningham dealing with an injury, Jalen Duren dealing with an injury, This is a long-winded way of me saying that the Detroit Pistons are dealing with injuries across the board. You know what's funny? And I don't mean this in like funny haha, but I mean it funny in the sense of ironic is a team that dealt with this exact same issue last season was a team we talked about at the very top of the podcast, the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic were a team that started out kind of rough, then really picked up momentum after the first 5 or so games. And unlike the Pistons, who like came out the gate swinging, this Magic team kind of had to go through some growing pains. I think they started out the season 1-3 and then put together like a 7 or so game win streak to kind of get things back on the right track before all of a sudden the injuries completely rattled their season and they ended up finishing just at 500 basketball. Now, still end up making the postseason because at the end of the day, it's the Eastern Conference. But at the same time, the Detroit Pistons, I mean, they're facing a very similar issue here where they are off to a really hot start, but they've got a lot of guys missing games. Now, something that I was not familiar with when it came to these guys, and don't get me wrong, I was very, big on some of the signings they had in the offseason, like Karis LeVert and bringing in Duncan Robinson, I thought was a good replacement given the fact that you weren't sure what the history of Malik Beasley would be, or the not the history necessarily, but the status of Malik Beasley would be coming into the season, given the fact that he was, dealing with his off the court situation. But I'm gonna take this time to shout out somebody that I'm assuming Pistons fans were already hip to, but I just learned about this week, of course, because he played my Chicago Bulls very recently. Yo, Dennis Jenkins is a little diamond in the rough. 6'4", 165 pounds. Had 24 points in that overtime game against the Washington Wizards to win 137 to 135. Knocked down 4 threes. Shot over 50%. Then he played my Bulls. 18 points, 12 assists, 2 steals, and was 9 of 19 from the field. Little bit of a gem there. You know, a lot of people are talking about some of these like sneaky rising X Factor type players across the league, right? We talked about a handful of them. Simone Fontecchio and Jaime Jaquez for the Miami Heat are one that I think has come up a lot on this podcast, or at least come up a decent amount because of the fact that, you know, they have just been a big part of why Miami's been one of the best offenses in the league so far this season. Another guy that we talked about on the podcast, Ryan Rollins for the Milwaukee Bucks. This guy who, you know, he's moved off of Golden State. He's moved off of the Wizards. He has finally gets an opportunity with the Bucks, and he's had himself a really, really strong season and had some really, really great performances that have given him a chance to show why sometimes it comes down to roster fit, and it comes down to whether or not an organization just believes in you. The Milwaukee Bucks believe in him, and here Ryan Rollins is the second leading scorer on the Milwaukee Bucks. This guy, Dennis, he looks like a dude. Dennis Jenkins is a name to watch, not necessarily because he's going to be some kind of breakout star or because he's going to be a most improved player candidate. I don't think it's going to be any of that. But he's going to be a dude that I think during this time frame, while the Pistons are dealing with so many of their injury problems across the board, especially at the guard spot, again, Cade, Jaden, Marcus Sasser, Osor, like you're missing so much ball handling with those guys out. This guy looks like he knows how to ball. He looks like he knows how to ball. He wasn't too shy of the moment. He was able to hit some big shots in this game, including a big time three in that game to send it to overtime against the Washington Wizards. Look, I don't know what's going on with the Pistons this year. They were one of my favorite teams to watch last season because I love a team that has the ability to punch above their weight. And I specifically love a team that discovers the greatness that can come with just having a competent roster. The Detroit Pistons, for the longest time, kind of similar to the Charlotte Hornets this season, finally have a competent roster with like a 9 to 11 man rotation of just guys that know how to hoop. Not a bunch of athletes that you got to teach how to play high IQ basketball, or a bunch of high IQ basketball players but they can't shoot, they're not high flyers, they don't put a lot of pressure on the rim. They just really know how to move the ball, right? They really know how to be play connectors, half court connectors. No. 9 to 11 guys who just know how to play real together basketball. And that's what the Detroit Pistons have right now. And guys like Dennis Jenkins are a good representation of the fact that this team is deep. They still got Karras. They still have Duncan Robinson. The front court is a little tough, but I like B-ball Paul personally. Man, I got to be honest with you. It's going to be interesting to see how Detroit holds up, because if you think that I'm worried about teams like the Knicks missing Jalen Brunson for a significant period of time, what could this team look like if they have to miss a Cade Cunningham, who should be in the top 5 conversation for MVP, if not maybe number 1 right now in the MVP conversation in some people's eyes? What does it look like if they have to miss him for a significant amount of time? He's listed as day-to-day right now, so maybe it won't go as far as I'm thinking. But what if you miss Jalen Duren for a period of time? What if B. Stu and Asar Thompson both miss real time? Both real defensive enforcers on that team. Two guys who take a lot of pride on being rim protectors, poking the ball out, playing passing lanes. There's a lot of bad boy Pistons aura in this team, and their enforcers are down right now, missing real time. So I'm just worried about the Detroit Pistons a little bit. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. We listed 4 different teams here: the Magic, the Knicks, the Bulls, and the Pistons. If you had to rank them in order of who is dealing with injuries the worst, or who is going to be smacked by the injury bug the worst in terms of these issues, who is gonna face the brute of these injury issues the most, you guys let me know who's the worst, who's the worst off and who you think is going to be able to coast through this thing pretty calmly. I think if I had to say who's going to be the worst off, I'm going to say it's the New York Knicks for right now because I don't know just how deep this Pistons problem is going to be. Maybe Cade and Jalen Duren get back into the lineup, and that kind of helps absolve things a little bit. So I don't want to freak out over that too much. The Bulls with Josh Giddey, we'll see how that goes, but him and Coby White are really the only two players that are really hurt for them right now. Granted, that's your starting backcourt on most nights, both down, so that's not great, but only time will tell. And Paolo Banchero with the Magic, I think actually he's the least of my worries because I think they're going to have him back very, very soon. But I'm interested to hear what you guys say in the comment section down below because maybe Paolo missing time creates a little bit of turmoil in the locker room because all of a sudden maybe other Magic players like how they play basketball together without Paolo on the floor. Maybe Jamal Mosley likes the way that they play basketball on the floor without Paolo healthy. And then when he comes back, it creates a different dynamic that now they have to work through. With the Knicks, if he misses double-digit games, Jalen Brunson's aura will be something that dictates a lot of how the rest of this 2025 goes for the New York Knicks. Just a lot of questions in the Eastern Conference, a ton of injuries across the board. But with that all being said, this has been another edition of the Routine Jumper Podcast. Did we hit our 20 minutes? Nope. Did we miss our 20 minutes with even less topics than we normally do? Yes, we did. That's not the point, man. I really love NBA basketball. I haven't been able to record as consistently as I want to so far this week. That's to each his own on that one. We're not making excuses. We're covering NBA basketball every single day in some capacity for the rest of this week going into next week, and we're going to pick this ball up, get it rolling, and start talking about some of the biggest topics in the NBA. You guys drop in the comment section down below some of the teams or some of the topics you guys would like me to talk about here on the podcast, and consider it done. With all that being said, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily NBA content. I will see you guys next time, but until then, peace.